Don Kelly has a winning percentage just under 470 as Pirates manager. That's better than Derek Shelton, but is it actually good or just less bad? That's next on Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Pirates, your daily podcast on all things Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. Today we're diving into whether Don Kelly is the right guy for the job, how Paul Skenes is single-handedly keeping this team afloat, and where this 6-year stretch ranks in MLB futility. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Let's get right into it. A simple question for you, really. Is Don Kelly actually good? Or is he just not Derek Shelton? I guess if you want, we could extrapolate this question out. We're all already in a mental place where just replacing Ben Cherington would be good. We wouldn't really know anything about the new GM. I mean, we'd guess. I mean, people would tell you ways that they've seen that this guy's going to be the bee's knees, and people would tell you, oh, this is exactly the type of person, and everyone will run around pretending they know him and they've recognized this name and been tracking his career for years, or it'll all be crap. And you won't know whether he's really better or not. All I can tell you right now is that Don Kelly has produced a record of 53-60. It's a 469 win percentage. He's done so in 113 games. I think it's been admirable given the state of his roster and honestly the state of how they were playing when he took over. Shelton's final stretch here, 12-26, 316 win percentage. I have no doubt that his win percentage would be better now. I'm not saying that it would be exactly where it is right now, but I mean, let's be real. We sit here poised to lose more games than the Pirates have in 2023 or 2024. So I think the win percentage would be north of 316 with Derek Shelton. I just don't know how much. So it's fair to say I think Don Kelly's had some impact. I look at like things that I think he's done better. Like I think he's done better with a consistent lineup, and you can't judge him on this category based on what he's doing right now. In fact, most of the things I'm going to mention are things that you kind of can't judge right now. I mean, how you construct the lineup. Well, a lot of that's got to do with wanting to showcase youngsters, or you have innings restrictions for people, or you have guys that you're just not going to get anything out of seeing any more at bats out of. So it's going to cause you to make different choices than you would have made if you were just doing things based on your own intent to win. We can't begin to understand where what he's told ends and what he thinks begins. In season, I can tell you that tends to lean more towards the manager. At this point, when you're already a losing club, you're not making a lot of decisions on your own. You got to get 4 innings for a guy or out of a guy, and that's the most you're going to get out of him no matter what, because that's what the team and the doctors and the plan says. Well, that's not on Don Kelly. And I think most of us that are mature enough to understand how work works understand that that's the situation. This isn't about a guy having the balls to stand up to his GM. Do you know how many MLB dugouts are filled with guys who had the balls to stand up to GMs. Right. Zero. It's not Art Howe in the movie Moneyball. Okay. And I would remind you of how Art Howe's career ended. Right. He didn't get with the program. And because he didn't get with the program and it became the hotness, he was radioactive and nobody would hire him. I would say he's improved bullpen usage at least before we got to this point where I think his options have been kind of limited and or telegraphed to a degree, if only because we're trying to make sure we get all these kids in there and they've all got different innings requirements and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. More consistent defensive alignments. I felt like this was pretty true before, and now I don't. Right now, I understand what you're doing, trying to juggle as many pieces as you can into something so that you get a little bit of a picture, but there's been very little consistency there. It is something that I appreciated early on in his tenure. And then overall, the team's had a slight bump in team batting average and on base percentage. But I'd also like to say I'm still seeing the mental lapses. And not just from O'Neal Cruz. I'm seeing it from other guys too, like not necessarily knowing how many outs there are, not necessarily knowing which base to go to, not necessarily being focused, on a play that was away from you and you really just kind of needed to be in the right place at the right time. That stuff has all kind of not really changed all that much. Teams often look disengaged offensively when they're out of it. But I mean, if I'm a manager that is essentially in a almost year-long audition for my job and the team wants me back, as we hear them say, I mean, we've heard to a man, they all respect Don Kelly. They all love talking to him. They love playing for him. They got no issues with them whatsoever. And sure, they're saying the right things. But what I'm seeing on the field looks like a bunch of players that certainly don't care necessarily whether he's back or not. They're certainly doing nothing to ensure it. I would think like a strong finish this season would have probably gotten the job. They've lost 9 of 10 now. They had some good things going. They were building some decent momentum there for a while, and it kind of looked like, okay, well, Don's a guy that can get less or more done with less. That I can't think of a better quality to have as a manager for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You're a guy that thrives on getting more with less. I haven't seen that recently. Certainly not in these last couple weeks. I mean, at the end of the day, Don Kelly is a stabilizer, not a savior. He's better than Shelton, but he's not showing signs of being a long-term solution either, if you ask me. I guess what I'm saying is I think a lot of us, pundits like me, journalists, fans, other players, hell, even Bob Nutting, very quick on the trigger to say that Don Kelly should be back, or he is good, or he's turned it around, or he's fixed it. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that what we really saw wasn't just the injection of energy that comes with change when your team is really, really struggling. A phenomenon that I'm not 100% sure we wouldn't see again if they were to move on from the GM, which should have absolutely jack squat to do with their current record. The GM is responsible for putting this team together, not the day-to-day. But I bet you'd see a little bit of a bump in performance just because things are different, just because there's different eyes on you, just because there's a different person's expectations that you're going to be held to. I think a lot of that happened with Don Kelly, and I think in many ways the bloom has kind of come off his rose. I was pretty sold, pretty damn sold that Don Kelly should come back and be the manager. And I wouldn't say that I've swung all the way to opposed, but I'm at least thinking about it now. I'm at least paying more attention. I'm at least got my antenna up. I don't like some things I've seen recently. I don't, and you can, oh, that's just O'Neal Cruz. Well, O'Neal Cruz is a pretty goddamn important player to have that be your one example of a guy that you can't get through to. I'm not so sure that Don Kelly hasn't managed his way out of a job these last couple weeks. I'm not even talking about the way they finished the season. You know, the record it's not going to be better this year. It's going to go down. And you're going to be able to tangibly look at that and probably blame Derek Shelton for the way he started as to why that's the case. There's going to be an out there for Don Kelly if you want to give it to him. I'm just asking, if we're talking about improving major things on this team and making a bunch of changes and coming back next year differently, let's maybe not stop short with the manager just because we like the guy and he's from here. Let's really critically look at what he's done and what he's actually getting these players to do, and at least ask the question, is it working? Is he really that much better than Derek? Is he? How much? I'm not 100% sure. When we come back, I want to talk about another point that kind of dovetails onto this, and not all in Don Kelly, but the team itself. This has just been historically one of the worst 6-year stretches in Major League Baseball history. And anytime you can say that, it's kind of a big deal. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less than 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing PrizePicks a little bit lately. It's such a fun way to stay locked in on the season, no matter what's going on, even if you aren't in touch. Sometimes I do it on the NBA just because I feel like it. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Make sure you smash that subscribe, like, drop a comment, tell a friend about the show. Do all that super cool stuff for me, please. I'd really appreciate it. Let's talk about how historically bad this baseball team has been under Ben Cherington. From 2020 to 2025, it's just been awful. The offense has been near the bottom of the league every single year, and the pitching's been awful until these last few years. Last couple years, I'd say. Pirates combined record of 340 and 517 is a 397 win percentage in that wonderful span of time. Comparable stretches are from 2001 to 2006. The Royals averaged 97 losses, but even that team could hit a little bit. 1915 to 1922. You love going back that far, don't you? The Athletics, who at that point I believe were the Philadelphia Athletics, last place 8 straight years. Boy, the Pirates have easily done that. And in or 2005 to 2010, your Pittsburgh Pirates had 90 plus losses every single year. I mean, that's pretty vanilla stuff, right? That's pretty straightforward comparisons of teams that were bad. Pretty easy to do. Nothing that none of you knew. But 6 years stretch like that, to lose that many games, to have 2 number 1 overall draft picks in that time span and a host of other high ones, to really have absolutely no financial commitments when you got here and only have relatively few at this point. Just a couple guys that you've decided to extend. Sure, one you just traded to, so there's been 3. They've made a couple strategic decisions as far as money they felt like spending. But that's it. This has been one of the worst stretches of baseball ever. Again, I give Ben Cherington leeway for what he had when he got here and the actual pieces he had to move. I see a lot of you want to go back and practice revisionist history and pretend that they should have been able to get something way better for Josh Bell or Jamison Taillon. Or Jamison Taillon was a guy coming off his second Tommy John, which is just no guarantee. There's no guarantee you're going to come back from that and be even a shell of yourself, let alone be able to do the job. So they traded him for a couple guys that the Yankees were more than happy to get rid of because they were all 40-man problems for them, and none of them had really broken through and stuck. 3 shots at getting a major league player out of 3 supposedly blocked prospects for a pitcher that, quite frankly, you weren't sure was ever going to throw a baseball again. I have no problem with that trade. I also have no problem with sitting here and telling you that a lot of GMs would have at least come out of that with 1 player. Starling Marte. I can tell you a lot of GMs would have come out of that with at least 1 player. They got nothing. Josh Bell. Nothing. Josh Bell, at the very least, is a power hitter. A power hitter that, frankly, I have told you a million times has warts. Strikes out too much, can't play defense. There's a lot of problems with Josh Bell. And he's streaky as hell. Josh Bell side by side with a player like, I don't know, Jack Sawinski. Not all that much different. Really. There's not. Besides, Josh has like kind of a minimum level of production. But this wasn't a great player to trade. Shouldn't have expected a lot back for him. And coincidentally, we didn't get a lot back for him. So it's like, I don't blame Ben Cherington for all 6 years of futility here. The first couple years, I feel like there was really not much he was going to do unless somebody bestowed him with the ability to work miracles. And as far as I'll sign a bunch of, well, in 2021 or 2020 or even 2022, there was no signing you were going to do that was going to fix this. And frankly, I don't have a better way to put this, so I'm just going to put it. And honestly, I don't hear anybody else ever say it. I don't ever hear, when all the criticisms are coming out and they're all justified. Again, this isn't a defense of Ben Cherington, but when you criticize him about what he's gotten done and what he hasn't gotten done, and when he started losing and when he didn't, 2022 was not going to be a winner. 2021 wasn't going to be a winner. It was never going to be a winner. And the part that people never want to talk about is you didn't want it to be. Because this whole effort falls on its face if you don't get a couple real top picks. And they did. And that's the thing. You can't afford to miss when you do get them. And part of that's luck of the draw. You get into a draft that has an ambiguous top of the mountain as far as prospects go. You're not going to get that top flight guy that comes in and changes everything. Some years you get a surefire winner like Paul Skenes, and all you have to do is show up, be the right guy at the right time that has that pick. That hasn't been the case. But there's no reason that the Pirates shouldn't be getting a lot more from their lower round drafts too. It's nice to see Bubba Chandler starting to come through here. Carmen Majinski has done some good things. Those are second rounders. Jared Triolo is a second rounder. Granted, a Neil Huntington second rounder, but you expect something out of a second rounder, right? Like, we're not getting a lot of that with the Pittsburgh Pirates. You've got the number ones that are hanging out down there, a few strategic international guys that have come along. But for the most part, if you're not a first round pick or a comp pick and basically a first round pick, good chance you haven't contributed here and haven't been given an opportunity to. Because they haven't developed those guys very well. Again, we're starting to see some signs of this stuff changing. But this has been a historically bad stretch. This is one of those, and they're going to have a worse record this year than they did the last two. I just think, I did a show earlier this week about what if they don't fire Ben Cherington? And a lot of you were like, come on, Gary, of course they're going to. Have you not been a Pirates fan for that long? I'm not sure it's of course they're gonna. I'm not sure. And I think what I just did, where I just kind of lessened the blow on Cherington, where I said hey, those first couple of years, I didn't expect them to win. Even the third year, not really. Knew this was going to take a while. Get it? Certainly expect better by now. He's let me down. Just he hasn't let me down from moment one because, again, I didn't have expectations in moment one or two or three for that matter. And a lot of you didn't either. But if you don't think Bob Nutting's having discussions like that with himself, I think you're probably selling him short. He knows he asked him to do a really hard job. He knows he hasn't given him all the resources to do said hard job. And on top of that, he probably didn't expect this job to come to fruition at least until year 4, maybe even 5. So he probably hasn't been nearly as let down as you, if only because he knew better than to pretend it was going to turn around quick. Maybe they should have come out and been just as forthright with you about how long that was going to take. People like me were out there telling you it wasn't going to happen overnight. That doesn't mean that I don't expect that they should be pushing the playoffs right now. They should at least be eclipsing 500 by now. And they haven't. And when the Pirates looked like they might finish with the same exact record for the third year in a row here before this recent stretch, I was probably going to have a pretty easy time saying listen, they were a crap O'Neal Cruz and Brian Reynolds season away from getting to 500. I can't say that now. I can't say that looking at this record now. Now I have no choice but to assume they're further away. Historically bad. You guys don't need me to keep pointing out all these reasons why I think that we need to move on from Ben Cherington, or I'm sure you're already there. But add this to the list. This wasn't just a bad stretch of baseball. This was one of the 9 worst stretches of futility by any franchise in Major League Baseball in the entire history of the game of baseball. It's one of the 9 worst. How much more evidence do you need that it's time to move on? When we come back, let's take this even further. Would this team even exist without Paul Skenes? I mean, really. I'm kind of kidding, but I'm kind of not. Hear me out. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data, visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. It helps organize, especially streaming apps. There are so many of them, and they all have different times of the month where the money comes out, and they'll increase the prices on you without notifying you necessarily, or if they do, it's in an email you ignored. Monarch really helps with all this stuff. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person. But actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees. It takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives you the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by a Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. The app makes it super simple. You can even see the exact view from the seat before you buy it. And I already mentioned it, but it's super important. Know your total up front. The fees are included with no surprise fees at checkout. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Hey, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Paul Skenes is here, and therefore we don't have to play this game, but I want to play it anyway. In 2025, 178 innings pitched, a 192 ERA, and 0.92 whip, and 203 Ks. Pirates are top 10 in team ERA, almost entirely due to Skenes, it feels. Without him, this team's likely a 110 loss team, maybe more. No national attention. I can't think of any reason anyone would pay attention to this baseball team this year other than the freak show oddity of watching and seeing how many games a team could possibly lose if Paul Skenes wasn't here. You'd be talking about probably an Andrew McCutchen retirement tour, or at least a lot of speculation about it. I'm sure you'd be talking about O'Neal Cruz and Brian Reynolds struggling still. There'd be an awful lot more heat and pressure on Bubba Chandler. In fact, he would have been up way earlier, and I'm not sure it would have gone much better than it is right now. Probably would have been worse. No Cy Young buzz would be going on. You might have a Rookie of the Year campaign for somebody. But this entire pitching staff, it looks good on paper and everything, but without Paul Skenes at the very top of it to steady it, you'd be looking at Mitch Keller as your true returning ace, right? Period. No more talking about him being like a 2 or a 3 or a 4, and he's just an innings eater and chill. You wouldn't be doing any of that because you wouldn't have Paul Skenes there to shield him. There's no comfort without the shadow that he casts. It's not likely that this is fixable in one off season. And I say that because if you take Paul Skenes out of the equation and really look at this baseball team, I don't see it. I see Paul as the reason that we think it could be fixed. He's certainly the reason that we expect it to be fixed. He's certainly the reason we expect them to have a better record because he's here. That's why we think there should be a sense of urgency, right? I mean, like, if this team was the team that we watched all year and you didn't have Paul Skenes in it and Jared Jones still got hurt, do you honestly think that you would feel like you were still just a bat or two away? I don't think we're even having that conversation if he didn't come along that quickly, which begs the question. Paul Skenes is kind of the reason that there's this much pressure on Ben Cherington. And yet, if he wasn't here, I think the entire picture looks so much worse that he may have indeed been let go last offseason if they didn't have Paul Skenes. I think that's how drastically he changes the impression of this baseball team, both nationally and locally. Think about it. Put your thinking cap on. Give me the reasons that this team is remotely close to winning anything if he's not here. I don't got anything for you. I can tell you, like, the pitching staff is coming along, and I think that they could be a top, let's say, 15 unit next year without Paul Skenes. I think that's possible. I think it's entirely possible that Bubba Chandler comes out and looks really good all next year. Mike Burrows looks good. Braxton Ashcraft looks like he could handle some time. Johan Oviedo, Mitch Keller. I can still put together a nice rotation. I can still put together a rotation that I think will win and keep you in most games. I can still put together a bullpen that I think can win and keep you in most games. Probably got to address a closer. But if Paul Skenes isn't here, man, where's that hammer? Where's that really, really different player? Right. I mean, like, if he's not here, this whole conversation is different. We're pressuring the team. We're pressuring them for a different reason, though. We're still thinking they suck. We're just thinking they suck for a way different reason. Paul Skenes confuses everything. Like, all of a sudden, here's this guy that they didn't care about Super 2 for. They didn't worry about Rookie of the Year. They didn't hold him back. They brought him in. They let him, like, lead the charge. The team wasn't ready to win. They brought him in and allowed him to go whether that team was ready or not, because getting his feet wet is part of the process of being ready to win, right? So it makes sense. If he wasn't here, I question a lot of things that they may or may not have done by now. Honestly, if Paul wasn't here, a big part of me wonders if Henry would be. Being anchored to him and being so important to Paul Skenes is a big reason that Henry gets as much cover for his defense as he does. You take this one name off this team, and everything that looks like it's fixable and fairly close goes away. I say that as damning information that I think needs added to the bucket of why it's time to move on from the GM. You got one player, you got really lucky. It's great. I'm glad you picked him. I'm glad you didn't hold him back. I'm glad you brought in good coaches to work with him. I'm glad about everything that you've done with Paul Skenes. I am. But without him, without looking at this team through the rose-colored glasses that are Paul Skenes, they're a lot further away than I think they are right now. Ben Cherington needs to go. It's time. And I would really love it if they got it done earlier. He's not the only problem, but he's a big problem. Don Kelly might be better than Derek Shelton, but that's a pretty low bar. Paul Skenes is the only reason this team isn't a complete disaster, and that's if you don't think they are now. And if the front office doesn't act soon, we're looking at another 6 years of irrelevance. Until next time, let's go Bucks.